Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. Thank you for this day that you have made. And Lord, open our eyes to the things that we need to see and know and understand. And Lord, bring us to freedom, not just white knuckling, but true freedom. And this I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So, who am I? What do I do? Why am I here? And why should you listen? Well, you have to figure out why you should listen. That's your own deal. Why am I here? And why can I speak on this topic? Well, I have struggled with addictions for a couple of decades, 22 years, in fact, struggling with various different addictions. And it started young, and you know how things go. You have life, you've got parents, you got home, you've got all sorts of stuff. I come from a mixed home. My father and mother were married a year before I was born. My mother had 2 children prior to that, so I have a half brother and a half sister. And they're 7 years and 5 years older than me, and so growing up, my brother was the one that liked to pick on me and beat me up, and we'd play football, and every time we played football, I'd come and crying off the field because of something. I got hurt. My sister wanted a sister and not a brother, and so she would dress me up in dresses and bow tie, and bows and other things like that when I was little, and so I was scarred for life, and those kinds of fun things. And as I started growing, then, am I going to have to say next slide the whole time, or does the clicker actually work? Yeah. All right, well, we'll figure it out. So you can do the next slide if you want. And so I ran into friends, and friends do things, and you do things, and my parents were working a lot, and so I had a lot of time home alone. And so in that time home alone, you just got a lot of time to not do much of anything. And so it gets a little bit boring, and the older siblings were off, and so, I just had to occupy myself. I was kind of a latchkey kid, and being a latchkey kid, I found plenty of things to get myself involved in. And as time grew, things became a little bit more deeper, a little bit more problematic, and a little bit darker, and so on. The life continued from that standpoint, in through high school and into college, and then meeting my wife, and then ultimately getting married. And the demons of the past and the issues of the addictions continued into my medical school training. And through my medical school training, sometimes I wonder how I graduated, but I did. And I didn't just squeak through, but, maybe that's partly the grace of God, and partly because sometimes I actually did study, and most of the time I didn't go to class. But emergency medicine, and while I was doing emergency medicine, that's really when everything kind of fell apart. That was where I failed, and things just weren't working. And life was just not working out so well. Church didn't work, God didn't work, my promises didn't work, people didn't work, and so on and so forth. And so I had really come to the point where I thought, okay, it's time for me to just give up. Right? Because that's got to be easier. That's got to be better than just trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing. And so I decided I was just going to give in and, let the addictions take me where they will. And it was a dark time. I know why people cut themselves. I know why people want to die. Sometimes you get to the point where you just, the thought of not existing is a comforting thought, because what you have is so much of a hell, then a non-existence would be much better than that. And I remember at times that it just threatened to crush me into the floor and crush out my existence, and I relished the thought. I just wanted to be free, and nothing that I had ever tried worked. And so my wife and I were married. We had 2 children at the time. We have 6 now. And things were not going well, and I didn't think that they deserved to go where I was planning on going. And so I had already planned that I was going to leave them, and I was just going to do the downward spiral myself. And it was at that moment, in the desperation where I had no more answers, no more solutions, nothing that I could really look to that I understood. My promises, as somebody wrote, were like ropes of sand, and I had no way out of the situation that I was in, no fixes, no solutions. And as sometimes it's said, I hit my bottom. Right? I hit my bottom. And that is where things began to change. What changed? Well, we're going to talk about that later as we go on through this week. Does the clicker work? The clicker doesn't work. The clicker doesn't work. All right. You're not going to be able to click fast enough to follow along with me, but you can try. And I'm going to run slides from here. So you can go to the next one. You got it. No, the back one with the house. So go back one. There you go. That's right. So when we're evaluating things, we need to evaluate things in such a way that there's a firm foundation. You can build all sorts of houses. They can look nice, but if it doesn't have a good foundation, there's going to be a problem. You could build that house with, drywall and wood. You could build that house with brick and mortar. You could build that with cinder block and so on. You could build it with gold and silver. It doesn't matter what you build it with. I mean, gold and silver looks nice. It's expensive and so on. But if that foundation is like that, it's just more of a loss when it goes. And, imagine waking up one day and you walk out your front porch and you realize, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's probably not covered by the insurance. They have some kind of clause for this. Yeah, no, we don't cover acts of God or sinkholes or, other things of that nature. And you're probably looking at that and going, oh man. But that's what we do all the time. You see, all the time we take information, but we take information without having a firm foundation in order to put that information in. And so it's important for us to have that firm foundation. Next slide. So looking at things that don't change, looking at things that are... Anyways, we can just look at that. Looking at things that don't change. What are things that don't change? Okay, taxes. No, taxes change. Yeah, and they change. They're going up. Right? Some countries pay 60% taxes. Other people 40%, some 20%, some maybe less, just depending on things. You can play around with that. God doesn't change, okay. Yeah, what else doesn't change? Yeah, my slides, that's right, yeah. Well, I don't know, we saw them change a little bit, and so it seemed like it was, look at there, right? So one of the things that doesn't change is law. And not talking about, human judicial law, talking about natural laws, like the laws of gravity and thermodynamics and laws of motion and so on. Those don't change. And so we're going to look at understanding things from the standpoint of law. And that might sound kind of interesting when we're talking about addictions, but believe me, it's going to play into it, and it's going to play into the solution, right? But we just need to understand some of the foundations really well first. Now, there's a fundamental law, and the fundamental law of all nature says that nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists or functions for itself, right? So this means that everything has needs. Right? Everything has needs. You got to have some kind of material, some kind of resources, some kind of power in order for something to exist, for it to function, and if it's a living thing, for it to live. And everything will take that power, materials, and resources and do something with it, right? And will pass something along. And so, in short, the fundamental law is that everything takes in order to give, right? Everything takes in order to give. And this is the law of life, and we're going to be looking at addictions in this context, right? So everything needs to what? All right, you're a little quiet. Everything needs to what? Take in order to give, all right? So we need to get that down. Remember that. This is really important. It's very basic, but it's very important. Everything does what? Takes to give. All right, takes to give. So that means that everything functions like a channel. And a channel has an entrance and it has an exit. A channel has a beginning and an end, right? At the entrance is where you take, and at the exit is where you give. And if you're going to put cause and effect in here, where are you going to put cause and where are you going to put effect? Where's cause going to go? All right, at the entrance, right? So cause is going to be at the entrance, and effect is going to be at the exit, all right? So it'll be at the exit. There we go, all right. And so, all right, that's good. It's good for us to recognize that. Now, everything in nature, it doesn't matter how small the thing is. It doesn't matter how big the thing is. If we're talking subatomic particles or we're talking stars, right? Every single thing in nature takes in order to give. But there's not only one thing in nature. There's lots of things in nature. And so one thing in nature is going to take and give, and something else in nature is going to take and give. And so there's going to be another channel that's going to take from what the first channel gave, and it's going to give, and another channel is going to take from that and to give, and taking and giving and so on. And ultimately, it all comes together in a circuit. It all comes together in a circuit. And we see it all over nature, right? Electricity functions in a circuit, right? If you have an open circuit, meaning that there's no connection, well, the thing doesn't work. You're going to have a closed circuit in order for it to function. We see that in the hydrological cycle, right? So water runs in a circuit as well, kind of a complicated circuit, but it ultimately, it's going to, you pick some point, like the ocean, well, it's going to come from there, and the ocean's going to give, and then the sky is going to take, and then the clouds are going to take it, and then they're going to give rain, and then the earth's going to take that, and it's going to give, and some of it's going to go down rivers, and some of it's going to get in the aquifer, and it's going to take, and then it's going to give, and it's ultimately going to get back to the ocean, and it continues functioning in a cycle. Even biologically, in human systems, we see the same thing happening, like in your circulatory system. Circle, all right, runs in a circuit. So you've got the heart, then to the arteries, and then the arterioles, and then the capillaries, and then to venules, and then to the veins, and then back to the heart, and the whole thing. Circuits, right, runs in a circuit. So everything in nature has individual components that take to give, and the components come together to form a circuit. And that's how everything in nature functions. And there has to be order to every function, right? And the order of the function, if we're talking about function, the order doesn't change. If you change the order, then you change the function, right? If you change the order, then you change the function. So for it to function a particular way, there has to be a particular order associated with it. And when the order is correct, the system is going to function how it's supposed to function. And when the order is not correct, then you're going to end up with dysfunction. Now, there's also information associated with order, and truth is information that puts things in the correct order so that it works. Right? Truth is information that puts things in the correct order so that it works, and error is information that puts things in the wrong order so that it doesn't work. So you can check objectively whether something is truth or whether something is error by whether it works or whether it doesn't work. Because truth works, error doesn't work. And if there is dysfunction in a system, then that means there must be error. There must be error somewhere, right? And that is true for addictions as well. Addictions is the result of error. It's the result of error, right? And error is going to result in dysfunction, right? But the question is, where is the error? What is the error? We're going to get there, right? We're going to get there. But we need to understand the basics first. So gravity is what gravity is. It's absolute. Our understanding of what gravity is might change from time to time. Of course, there was the old Newtonian view with Newton under the apple tree and then him going, it seems to be an attractive force between one mass and another mass, and the larger the mass is, the larger the attractive force that it is, and it's almost like two magnets, and the Earth is a big magnet, and the apple's a little small magnet, but they attract each other, and it goes towards... And then Einstein came along. Oh, boy. And Einstein just tore it all apart, and he said, no, that's not what it is. What it is that mass warps space-time. And so it's kind of like putting let's say a baseball or a softball on a stretched nylon, right? And you put it on there and it's going to dip it a little bit. Well, you put a bowling ball on there, it's going to dip a lot more. And as long as you have another mass within the context of that slope, that dip, then they're going to go towards each other until they run into each other, and then they're going to stick to each other. And that's how gravity works. I don't care. I don't care whether it's the attractive force like Newton said, or whether it's the warping of space-time like Einstein says. What do you know about gravity? You jump up, you come down. You jump off of one step, well, you get one kind of landing. You jump off of 2 steps and you get a different kind of landing, and you jump off of 5 steps and that's a different kind of landing. And if you jump off of there, well, yeah. Splat. So our understanding of gravity might change from time to time, but it doesn't change gravity. Gravity is absolute. It is what it is. It just is what it is. And it's the same thing with thermodynamics. Thermodynamics is what it is. And our understanding of it might change from time to time, but our understanding doesn't change it. It's just our understanding of it that might change. And cause and effect, that's a law. Cause and effect is what it is. It's absolute. And our understanding of it might change from time to time, but that doesn't change that, right? So everything that functions by law. And every function is governed by a law. And so all laws that govern function are unchangeable. Right? If they were, then function would be all over the place. Wouldn't it be interesting if you woke up one day falling up? Because gravity just reversed itself, and now instead of being an attracting force, it's a repelling force, you know? Or one day you went to drink water and you poured it and it went down, and then all of a sudden it crystallized. In fact, all of the water in you crystallized. And now you're, yep, Life would not happen very well if that was the case, right? So because laws don't change, function doesn't change, and there's predictability, and you can experiment, and now you can work on stuff. The Wright brothers can figure out how to fly, and you can figure out how to explore space eventually, and you can build submarines, and hopefully don't implode them, and batteries, and robots, and so on and so forth, right? We have all of these things because there are predictable laws that do not change that govern function, and function is how function is, right? So, all right, let's look at us. We have a road here, and the road, it represents, let's say that it represents health, right? Health. So on that road, there's proper function. And when there's proper function, well, from a human standpoint, it's comfortable, right? When things are functioning the way that they're supposed to, it's comfortable. Now, what do you need in order to remain on that road, in order for you to function? Yeah, so oxygen's one of the needs. What other needs do we have? Water, yes. What else? Food, all right. All right, what else? Okay, all right. So, yes. We also need the sun, right? We need warmth, right? All of these various different things. I'm not going to put an exhaustive list, and it'll be exhausting to do that. But, just a representative list. And so as long as you've got the oxygen, water, and food, and sunshine, and warmth, and so on that you need, well, it's going to be comfortable, and you're going to function. But if any of those parameters get off, well, there's going to be problems, right? Now, there's on the road, and then there's off the road. What is it that determines whether you're on the road or whether you're off the road? What is it that defines the edge of the road so that there's either an on or an off? All right. Well, it's defined by law, right? It's defined by law. There is a law that governs how much sodium you need in your bloodstream. There's a law that governs how much potassium that you need in your bloodstream. There is a law that determines how much calcium that you need inside of cells. There is a law that determines all of these various different things, and as long as you're inside the law, it's going to function. But what happens if you get outside of the law? All right, some things are going to happen, right? So now there's going to be dysfunction, and there's going to be discomfort that's associated with it. So let's take warmth as our example, because that's an easy one for us to relate to, right? It's kind of harder for us to relate to sodium because it's not often that we're like, oh yeah, my sodium levels are going down right now, Now, when they go down too far, you'll feel it. You might not know it has anything to do with sodium, but you'll feel it, right? But when it comes to warmth, that one's very, it's very feely, right? So what happens if your temperature goes up too high? It goes above the law. How do you feel now? Okay, so you might feel sick. What's the particular way that you would feel if the temperature goes too high? You feel, all right, I think I heard it. Hot. There you go. It's not complicated, right? So you feel hot. What happens and what do you do when you feel hot? Okay, all right. Tell your husband to turn the air up, right? And if I was the husband, I'd be like, it's 76. All right, she said turn it up, 78. All right, there we go. I turned it up. And she's like, oh, no, down. Okay, 76. Happy? That's where we started, right? So yes, you turn on the air conditioning, you drink some cool water, you get out of the heat, you do something in order for you to get your temperature back down. And once your temperature gets back down within the law, then you feel good. And you don't have to keep going in that direction. But what happens if you keep going in that direction? You said turn the air down, and your husband turned it down to 50. Oh, then you go in the opposite direction, and now you get cold. Oh, Now, if you get cold, what do you want? Yeah, you want my initial interpretation, turn it up. Turn the air up. Okay. All right. So yes, you turn the heat on, you get a blanket, drink something hot, something in order to get your temperature back up into the normal range. And when it's in the normal range and you're within the law, then you feel okay and you're good. Right? So once you get off the law, the moment you get outside of the law, you start having symptoms. Right? Symptoms come as the effect of getting outside of the law. Now, I say that because we usually use the term symptoms in relation to things that are not so nice. I suppose, technically speaking, symptoms would be inside the law as well, but they would be nice symptoms, It's comfortable, I feel like a good temperature, I'm full, I'm satisfied, I'm hydrated, and whatever. But once you get outside of the law, then it becomes uncomfortable, and you have the uncomfortable symptoms. Now, are the symptoms there to kill you, or are the symptoms there to save you? Well, yeah, it's there to save you, right? Because you're clueless about your sodium levels. Now, they're really, really, really important, but you're clueless about that. I mean, how many people go around thinking, I wonder what my sodium level is right now? No, not unless you work in ICU and you know how critical it is because people are in there. You're like, oh, I wonder. I'll get my blood test next year. So we don't necessarily go around wondering about these things, but when it gets out of whack, you start feeling it. And you know what we care about? We care about how we feel. We care less about the law, but we care about how we feel. And so, all right, how we feel and the law, it's tied together very wonderfully. So, symptoms are like the rumble strips on the side of the road to let you know you're getting off. And they're there for the reason to save you from certain doom if you continue going off in that direction. And I'm very glad that rumble strips exist, and I'm very glad that they existed a number of years ago because I fell asleep while I was driving, and I woke up 2 lanes later on the rumble strips, going to an overpass with the concrete pylons. And I corrected quick and got in that lane. I was like, I'm very grateful for rumble strips, right? But I can tell you, I'm not as grateful for symptoms. I should be, but I'm working on it still. So what happens if you don't stop at symptoms? What if you keep going? Now your temperature goes up even higher. Does it get better or worse? Yeah, it gets worse. It's not just symptoms. Now you have disease. Now you got heat stroke, heat exhaustion, other things of that nature. It feels really bad. You don't function very well at all. The dysfunction is getting worse. The feelings are getting worse. And now you might actually be willing for somebody to help you. All right, here's a quiz on human nature. The farther you go, the worse it feels, the closer you get to death. So between the 2 species, and I call them species, but anyways, between the 2 species of humans, one male and one female, which one has to go farther? Oh. All right, somebody got it. Yes. The men, maybe I'll see the doctor. And sometimes the women, I gotta go see the doctor. I'm saying sometimes, right? That's a generalization, right? It's fun, just, But yes, it tends to be. I see a lot more women in my practice than I see men. It doesn't matter if it's medicine. It doesn't matter if it's counseling. It doesn't matter whatever it is. I see more women than I see men. All right, so if your temperature gets up really hot like that, well, you might really be willing to let somebody do something to you in order to get you back. I had a friend that worked in the military down in the southeast, and sometimes the temperature and the humidity both get up really high, and when you've got all of that military fatigue and you've got a 50-pound pack that you're carrying and you're having to march, and you sweat, but the sweat doesn't evaporate, and so it doesn't do you any good, and you dehydrate, and then not uncommonly, you'll have somebody go, and they're out. And, and then the medics come there and they check them out and they've got a temperature of 108, 109, sometimes 110. Now, you got to do something really fast, really quick, or else they're really dead. So, there's a special building just for that. You load them right up into that, into that ambulance or whatever, and you race them right over there. And that building is set up just for that occasion. And they will strip you, throw a probe up somewhere you don't want it to be. They will start a couple IVs with chilled fluid and start running it into your veins, and they will drop you into a bathtub with ice and water. If you were in your right mind and you weren't way off over here, But if you're about to die, then it's kind of like, okay, all right, yes. Until you get revived to the point where you're like, oh, stop it, right? So you get a little bit more motivation the farther you go away. And of course, if it goes down too low, then you get frostbite and chilblains and other things like that. And it's really bad, and you really got to do something about it right now in order to get back within the confines of the law. And if you don't, well, you got problems, because past symptoms and disease is death. And, we don't want to go there. What would happen if you had no symptoms if you got off the road? And the farther you went, you didn't have symptoms. The farther you went, you didn't have symptoms. And all of a sudden, you got to that line. Like, oh, life is good. Oh, yeah, how are things going? Oh, yeah, great and wonderful, and, all that kind of stuff. What happened? I don't know. They said they were wonderful. Check them out. Oh, they're dead. How'd they die? Oh, a whole bunch of things were going on. Why didn't they know? Well, they couldn't feel anything. So it's a good thing for us to feel the bad stuff along the way, because it becomes motivation to stop, to check things out, to look for what's going on. It's the same thing with addictions. Right? It's there. There's symptoms. It's there not to punish you, but to make you think, well, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Maybe we're outside of the law. Now, how many people have needs? According to the law, how many people have needs? Yeah, all people do. Right? And if you're the same kind of thing, then you have the same kind of needs. Right? So if I was a fake flower, I would have certain fake needs. All right? If I was a real flower, then I'd have some real needs. And different flowers, well, if it's the same kind of flower, then it has the same kind of needs and pretty much the same kind of quantities, right? Well, people are people. And if you go find a people in this planet or a people on another planet, or, well, in a space station, or you find okay, I'll be proper with my English. If you find a person in this place or a person in that place or a person in the other place, well, guess what? They all have the same needs. Maybe not all in the same quantity. Maybe not all at the same timing. But they all have the same needs, right? So you and I need chemicals. We need oxygen. We need water. We need nutrients, right? We need temperature or warmth. We need pressure. Some people are like, oh, no, I got too much pressure. I'm not talking about that kind of pressure. Right? I'm talking about atmospheric pressure. If there was not atmospheric pressure, at your body temperature, you would boil. Which is why Mr. So-and-so, whoever did the highest skydiving, whatever, that's why he had a spacesuit on when he jumped out. Because if he would have opened the hatch hatch, the pressurized hatch at that time, then he would have just boiled to death and then froze to death afterwards. He would have boiled and then frozen and not known it. Just because you need to exist in a certain, not just temperature, but pressure. And you need what you need because you are what you are. And different things have different needs. That's fine. A tree needs soil. You don't. I tried it once. I had a dare, eat dirt. Okay, well, I did. It didn't taste very good, and it didn't do me any good. Right? So trees love dirt. It's wonderful for them. I'm not a tree. It doesn't do good for me. But what the tree produces, have you ever seen a tree eat an apple? No, a tree, if an apple tree could think, it probably looks at the apple and is like, oh, disgusting. You'd want me to eat that? Oh. That's just what I get rid of. And you and I look at it and we're like, oh, an apple. You're like, how can that be? You look at what you leave in the toilet. And you're like, oh, disgusting, whatever, get rid of that. And something else looks at it and goes, oh, an apple. Something takes and gives, and something else takes from that and gives, and something else takes from that and gives. That's how it works, right? So different things have different needs, and that's good. That's the way it should be. And you can't change what you are, therefore you cannot change what you need. Or if we turn it around the other way, you cannot change what you need, therefore you cannot change what you are. Yes, all right, let me reemphasize that. We've had a little confusion on that over the last few years. You cannot change what you need, therefore you cannot change what you are. All right, just getting that out there. All right. So, everything you need comes from outside of you, and if it remains outside of you, you die. It must be brought in order for you to live by it. Right? And who is it that must bring it in? Yes. All right, so if I'm suffocating and you all hyperventilate for me, is that going to do me any good? No? Okay. If you all are dehydrating and you're about on the verge of death and I'm like, oh boy, I better drink a lot so I can help you all out. Does that work? No, that doesn't work, right? So if that oxygen remains even at your nose, it's not going to do you any good. The only way you can live by it is if it comes in and becomes a part of you, right? Then you can live by it. And that water, if that water remains at your lips, you're not going to live. The only way you can live is if it comes in and becomes a part of you. Right? So, everything you need must be brought into you by you. Right? It's you that must bring it in. And so you need oxygen, so you're the one that has to breathe. And you need water, so you're the one that has to drink. And you need food, so you're the one that has to eat. This is not rocket science. Right? That's basics. But you know how many people just don't get it? Well, let me put it this way. Sometimes it's so basic we don't think about it. Right? I just put it that way. Sometimes it's just so basic we don't think about it. But we need to think about the basics because the basics are the building blocks. It's the foundation, right? So we got to have a firm foundation because if we're building on something that doesn't have a firm foundation, forget it. Go home. It's no use for me being here either. All right. So everything takes to give. Everything functions like a channel, has an entrance and an exit, takes to give. Cause is at the entrance, effect is at the exit. And everything functions like a channel, right? So how does the body function? How does the body function? Same way, right? Is it exempt from this law? No. Now, how many parts of the body must take and give? All of them. All the parts you want to keep. All right? All the parts you want to keep. If you don't care about the part, well, it can stop taking and giving because the only way it's going to live is if it takes to give. Every cell must take to give. Every tissue must take to give. Every organ and organ system and the whole organism must take in order to give. And even the organelles of the cells must do that, and the molecules that make up, or the macromolecules that make up those organelles, or the micromolecules, or whatever, and you get down to the atoms and the protons and neutrons and electrons and even the subatomic particles, every bit of it must take in order to give. Now, you have a lot of different systems in your body. How many think that your kidneys are important? Okay, yeah, those are slightly important. If you didn't have them, something would happen. Or maybe something would stop happening. You, right? So kidneys are important. But are kidneys important without a heart? Yeah, are kidneys important without a heart? Like if you had a body with kidneys, but you had no heart, is that going to work? No, that's not going to work. All right. What if you had kidneys and a heart but no lungs? What if you had kidneys and heart and lungs but no liver? That's not going to work. What if you had kidneys, heart, lungs, liver but no stomach? What if you had kidneys, heart, liver, lungs, I keep forgetting now, stomach, but you had no esophagus? All right. So how many parts are necessary? All of them, even the appendix. Yeah, they used to say, oh, those are vestigial organs. Really? Okay. Yes, I can live without it, but I might not be able to live so well without it because, man, when you knock out all the bacteria with those antibiotics, guess where you can keep them alive despite the antibiotics and then repopulate the digestive tract? From the appendix. Yeah. Tonsils? Oh, no, you don't need tonsils. You can take all of those out. Really? Okay. Yeah. All right, so how many parts of the body do you need? Yeah, you need all of them. It's important to have that. Sure, you can cut off a finger, but, then it doesn't work as well as if you had it. You can cut off an arm and you can still survive, but it just doesn't work as well as it did before. There are some parts that you can, do without, but it's preferable to do with them rather than without them, right? So the body functions as a unit. It functions as a whole. Everything is taking and giving. Does the body need to be controlled? Okay. So what controls the functions of the body? Oh. Okay. The mind. Yes, okay. All right. So how many functions of the body does the mind control? A lot of them. Okay. Are there any functions of the body that the mind doesn't control or regulate? I don't know of any. Right? What if you had mouth and esophagus and trachea and lungs and stomach and small and large intestines and liver and pancreas and spleen and kidneys and all these different things, and you didn't have a brain? Whoops. Yeah. What's going to control the function? Nothing. Yeah, you're talking vegetable. So the mind is what controls the functions of the body. Now, how does the mind control the functions of the body? Does it go, womp, 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 and then some of the cells go, womp, 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 womp? How does it work? What's the mechanism? All right, so there's a nervous system, and the nervous system is made up of what? Nerves, yeah, okay, good. I mean, we're basic, right? We're just building the basic building blocks, all right? So you got nerves, you got wires, right? You got wires running throughout all the body. Now, they're living wires, we call them nerves, but you got wires going throughout all the body. So it's not that the mind just goes, and some cell goes, in return, but you've got a communication system. Right? You got the wires that it's going. And guess what? You've got wires going to every part of the body both with signals coming to and signals going from, right? So there's a back and forth communication that's happening through the nerves, right? And so now, when the central nervous system is functioning, we know that we've got electrical activity. That electrical activity begins in the cortex of the brain, and then it goes down to the central part of the brain, crosses, goes down the spinal cord, and then it goes out to the various different parts of the body, where it is sending information to, right, commands and so on. And then from those parts of the body, there are signals that are sent back to the same and the opposite direction so that you can know what's going on in your body. Now, how much of that happens unconsciously? Yeah, the vast majority of it, right? The vast majority of it. There's a few things that you voluntarily control, like skeletal muscle movement. Praise God, cardiac muscle movement is not consciously controlled, right? Because you'll be like, okay, yeah, keep going. Whoa, what was that? You're gone, right? So, it's a good thing that there's some automatic control that's there, but it's all controlled through the mind, right? Your heart rate is controlled there, your blood pressure is controlled there, your fluid volume is controlled there, your pH balance is controlled there, each of the individual functions of the different organs and that kind of stuff, your respiratory rate and your oxygen saturations and all that kind of stuff, all of it is controlled by the mind. Right? It's all regulated and controlled there. And everything is set up very specifically, so you've got one spot in your brain that is connected to one spot in your body, and you've got one spot in the body that's connected to one spot in the brain. So everywhere that's in the body has a representation up there in the brain, so the brain knows where it's coming from and where things are going to. Right? So, that's good. Now, thoughts. What are thoughts? Okay, your character. Feelings. What are thoughts? All right, how many of you think? All right, most of you. Some of you don't. Not sure what to think. All right. So, if you're a human and you're alive, you think. But what are thoughts? Responses to life. Okay, responses to life. Okay. All right. So, when you have a thought, how do you know scientifically that you have a thought? Because you think it, because it exists, okay? How are you going to measure whether you have a thought or not? Oh, electrical impulses. All right, so the electrical impulses. Where do electrical impulses begin? Yeah, it begins in the brain, and more specifically, it begins in the cortex of the brain, right? That's where the electrical impulses begin. And so, boom, you got some electrical impulses, and then those impulses are sent down to the central part of the brain. We might call that the limbic system, and there's several different components to that. We don't need to get into the details. And there, it's going to release some neurotransmitters. There's going to be some chemicals that are released. And then you have other neurons, other nerve cells that pick up those chemicals and say, oh, let's send a signal back as reaffirmation or as affirmation of the signal being received. So you have a feedback mechanism or a feedback loop that happens. So you have electricity that begins in the cortex, and you have chemistry that's generated there in the central part of the brain. Now, I don't mean that other parts of the brain don't generate chemistry. I'm just saying, where does this begin, right? And so then you have that received by other neurons, and that's sent up to the cortex. And in response, you feel feelings or you have emotions, right? So feelings or emotions are the response to chemistry. Right? It's a response to chemistry. So I can manipulate how somebody feels by giving them chemicals. Right? I can manipulate how somebody feels by giving them chemicals. I can give you certain chemicals that make you feel chill. And I can give you other chemicals that make you feel revved up and excited and anxious and so on and so forth, right? So I can manipulate your feelings with chemistry. And in fact, your feelings are the result of chemistry, right? They're the result of chemistry, the type of chemistry that's there in the brain and so on, right? But what I cannot do with chemicals is make you think a particular thought, right? With chemicals, I cannot make you think a particular thought. I can make you feel a particular way, but I cannot make you think a particular thought, right? So it's in the cortex where we have reason and judgment and intellect and these various different things, and then it's down in the limbic system where we have our feelings and our emotions, and then down there in the the basal part of the brain, then you have a lot of the automatic functioning that happens. So thinking is actually what humans do most. You do more thinking than you do breathing, right? And we're always thinking, but the question, again, is what are thoughts? And where do they come from? Right? And where do they start? Right? Wherever thoughts start, that's where you'll find the beginning of the human being's function. Right? Because you don't begin with a heartbeat. You don't begin with respirations, right? You don't begin with feelings or other things of that nature. You begin with thoughts. Now, what do thoughts do in you, and what do thoughts do anywhere? Well, here's a podium. Where'd that come from? Somebody thought of it. Here's not real flowers. Where'd it come from? Oh, yeah, you put it out there. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. You put it there, but where did it come from? Yeah, you thought about it, right? Yes. Where did the screen come from? No, I'm not saying the materials, but somebody thought about the screen, right? Where'd the computer come from? Right? Somebody thought about each of the different components. Somebody thought about the carpet. And I'll guarantee you, a lot of people thought for a long time about what color it should be. I'm sure there was a committee on the carpet color for the church. That's often how it goes, right? So everything around you is the result of thought. And if this was a real plant, where did it come from? Somebody's thought as well. Just not my thought, their thought, right? Now, how much do thoughts do in you? More than what? More than you can measure. Yeah. Yeah, it does more than you can measure. Right? Everything you do is an effect of your thoughts. Right? So thoughts do everything in us. Now, I'm not saying thoughts control chemical reactions and other things like that. That's controlled by law. But the control and the regulation of what happens in the body is the result of thought. It is. Not oftentimes, and the vast majority, unconscious, right? Not conscious thought, but unconscious. All right, so can the brain think? Can the brain think? Okay. Can the chair think? Okay. What's the chair made of and what's the brain made of? Okay, inanimate versus animate. Okay. All right, yeah, but what are they made of?
Material.
Yeah, material. They're made of chemicals, right? Protons, neutrons, electrons, and so on. The chair happens to have the protons, neutrons, and electrons in a particular concentration and order and so on and so forth. And your brain happens to have protons, neutrons, and electrons in a different concentration and order and so on and so forth. But is it the concentration, order, and so on of the protons, neutrons, and electrons that determines whether you can think? Now, is thought the effect of matter? Is thought the effect of matter? All right, so let me introduce you to the two main theories in this world at this moment. One, nothing blew up, and from it came everything. And unlike other explosions where things fly apart, this time things came together. And as things came together through random occurrences, now the mass or matter began to organize. And through random occurrences, organization became more complex. And once organization became complex enough, life was the result or the effect of that. So life is the effect of the complexity of random matters organization. You put random and organized together in one term, it's really hard. But anyways, and then as matter continued to randomly organize, then matter could regulate itself, it could organize itself, it could become more complex, and the more complex it became, then the more capacity that it had to be able to then generate an electrical impulse, and then you had multiple electrical impulses, and then you had multiple complexity of matter, and so on and so forth. And the greater the complexity of matter, then the greater complexity of thought. Right? So you are the result of the random collision of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and you happen to be simply a cosmic accident or occurrence that was improbable but actually happened. And your ability to think is simply the effect of the organization of matter. How about Holy Spirit matter? Okay. All right. The other prominent theory in the world is God created the heavens and the earth, and He is the source of matter and everything else, and He is the organizer and the regulator and the formulator and so on and so forth. And I can tell you from a scientific standpoint, we have still not gotten away from the fact that life only comes from life. There is no generation of life from non-life. Can't happen, won't happen, hasn't happened. Life only comes from life. So God is life. He's alive. He's life. And from Him came life. So life is not the effect of matter. Life is the effect of God. But God uses matter in our case. Now, the Bible says God is, well, Jesus said God is spirit. It says God is spirit. And Jesus said, the words that I speak to you, they are spirit, and they are life. Interesting. Right? So word being life, and word being spirit. And then we read in John, if you read John chapter 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it talks about creation and said that nothing was made without Him, right? That all things were made by Him. And then when we go back to Genesis, to the first chapter, we see that it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it says, God said, let there be light, and what? There was light. God said, let there be a firmament, and what? The firmament. God said, let there be dry land, and guess what? Dry land. God said, let there be a sun, moon, and stars, and guess what? Did the Word of God need the pre-existence of material in order to be able to organize something in order to make it happen? No, that's the nature of the Creator, is the Creator is the source, and the Creator doesn't need material to work with in order to do something. So, is life the effect of the physical complexity of matter, or is life the effect of God? Is thought the effect of the physical complexity of matter, or is thought the effect of spirit? Because doesn't God think? Yeah, but God is what? Spirit. Angels are ministering spirits. Do angels think? Yeah. Does a tree think? No. What does a tree not have? A spirit. Doesn't have a spirit. Does a beetle think? Yes. What does a beetle have? A spirit. Right? Yes, has life. But all animal forms have a spirit. Paul talked about it. Well, so did Solomon. He said the spirit of man returns to God, and the spirit of the animals return to the earth. Right? And so on. Right? So, can the brain think? Well, the brain is composed of chemistry, and chemistry can only react according to law. Right? Chemical reactions. That's all it can do. And so those are dependent upon outside factors in order to function. So you have to have a certain temperature, certain pressure, enzymes that are present and whatever and those molecules brought together in a sufficient energy to overcome certain forces. And when you have the right conditions together, the chemical reactions are going to occur. It'll happen by law. Right? And those chemical reactions can only function according to laws that govern their function. So chemistry can absorb information, it can store information, and it can share information. Right? You can go out and you can see drawings in caves from thousands of years ago. That's information. Okay? It's information. It can take that information, but guess what matter cannot do? What chemistry cannot do in relation to information? It can't create information. It can only take it and give it, right? It can only do that, right? So it's kind of like a computer hardware. Computer hardware, you can put the information into the hardware. It can store it, and then it can spit it out later, right? So chemistry can do that, and this can't. All right, but how many thoughts can the brain itself think? None. Now, can you think without a brain? You as a human being? No. There is no thinking without a brain. So yes, we as human beings must have a brain in order to be able to think, but it's not the brain itself that thinks. Now, the brain is needed in the process of thinking. Absolutely. But chemical elements themselves cannot feel anything, cannot choose, cannot make decisions, cannot destroy themselves, cannot have consciousness, cannot have cognitive or thinking abilities, cannot have morals, cannot realize something and like it or not like it, right? Those are all impossible for chemicals. They just can't do that. Chemicals cannot organize themselves, regulate themselves, act for themselves. They can only react to outside forces, and chemicals cannot look in a mirror and study themselves and know why they are the way that they are. They can't, right? So if you understand the law, then you can weed through a number of deceptions. Like some of the theories that were coming out over the last few years when certain kinds of bugs were flying all over the place and certain kind of treatments were being utilized in relation to that, and there was fear of self-assembling nanobots and other things of that nature that might be associated with no, because chemistry can't organize itself. Now, you can act upon chemistry from outside and then cause certain chemical reactions to happen and so on and so forth, but it cannot organize or regulate itself. Right? So humans are not like that. We can do everything, right? We can act for ourselves, not just react. And we can think, and we can feel, and we can understand, and we can look in the mirror and understand why things are the way that they are, and like things and not like things, and so on and so forth. So where does that come from? Well, we also have other needs. Anybody need love? Yeah? A few of you. 3. 3 people need love. All right, 4. All right, good. 5. All right, we're starting to work up there. All right, 6. Very good. Do you need truth? Yeah? Do you need justice? Yes. Do you need compassion? Yeah. Do you need harmony? Yes. Do you need security? Yes. All right, those are all spiritual needs. They're not physical needs. There is not a single proton, neutron, electron that needs any of those things. There's no combination of protons, neutrons, and electrons, atoms, molecules, cells, tissues, organ systems, or even an organism that needs those. Those are all spiritual needs. They're not physical. So, yes, in order for you to be comfortable and to function, yes, you need harmony and security and compassion and truth and justice and love and all of those various different things. And there is a law that governs the function of these things, and the law says you got to have it. But guess what? You can never have too much of it. Can you imagine having too much love? Really? What does that look like? I don't know. Let's try. Oh, that was great. Let's try again. More. Oh, that was really great. Yeah, let's try again. More. Oh yeah, that's awesome. How, can you have too much truth? Too much compassion? No, but you can have too little. Oh boy, you can have too little. And when you have too little and you're deficient in those things, guess what? You can get symptoms and you can get disease and you can die. You can die, right? If you have too little. So everything you need must be brought into you by yourself. So you need oxygen, you got to breathe. You need water, you got to drink. You need food, you got to eat. You need love, so you got to... Oh, I love it. It's the same response I get everywhere. Everywhere. And everybody's wrong. I'm going to show you how you're wrong. Oh, you need oxygen, therefore you breathe out. Is that how it works? I'm just using your answer and bringing it back to you. You need water, so you pee. You need food, so you vomit. Is that how it works? No. No, that's not how it works. If you need it, what must you do? You got to bring it in. You got to take it in, right? You cannot give what you do not have. So you got to take it in first in order for you to have it, and then you can give it. But everybody believes when it comes to love, in order to get love, you got to give love. You got to love them first in order to get love back. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And that deception, that delusion that everybody has, I ask this question everywhere I go, everybody gets it wrong. That delusion is going to be the basis of the addictions. It'll be the basis of the addictions. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. So if you need love, how are you going to take it in? Okay, let's say that you were having a really bad day. Things were not going well. And you came home and you stopped at the mailbox on the way. And besides the few other bills that you did not need, there was a handwritten letter. And it was by somebody, and it was the right somebody. And you're like, oh, good, yeah, something. And you go inside, and you open it up, and you read it, and they say, dear, and they has your name. I've been thinking about you, can't get you off of my mind, thinking about the last time we were together, and looking forward to when we can be together again. And then it has all sorts of mushy-gushy stuff after that, and it's signed love, and it has their name afterwards, and a few hearts and X's and O's, and a teddy bear, and all that kind of stuff. How do you feel? Oh, you feel loved. How much love was in the paper? How much love was in the ink? How much love was in the stamp? How much love was in the glue? How much love was in the matter? Can you extract it? Can you put it under a microscope? Can you concentrate it, purify it, stick it in an injection, inject somebody with it, and now they have love? Is that how it works? No, it doesn't work that way. Where's the love? Where's the love? You know what that letter contains? Information. It contains information because remember, physical things can absorb information, can store information, can transmit information, but physical things cannot originate information. So on that letter is information, and you have gone and you have extracted, you have interpreted the information that's in that letter, and you understand that information to mean that that person loves you. Now, if that letter had been written, same wording, handwritten, all that kind of stuff, dear so-and-so, thinking about you, can't get you off my mind, looking forward to when we can be together again, and all that kind of stuff, and all the mushy-gushy things and everything, and signed at the bottom, it says, your used car salesman down at the corner, come see me soon. How loved do you feel? Do you feel the same way? No, why? What's the difference? In the one, you believe it, and in the other, you do not. So the taking is by belief. It's by belief, right? It's a belief thing. The information that means love and that you believe, you take it in. If it means love and you don't believe it, you're not taking it in. You're sitting at the table, but you're not eating the food. Right? So, hunger, thirst, fatigue, chills, suffocation, those are all physical symptoms that shows that the body lacks something. They are the gas gauge on your vehicle, the temperature gauge on your vehicle, something to let you know what's going on. So, who does the body signal its needs to? Okay. So you say God. If your fuel tank is running empty, is God going to say, oh, okay, it's time for me to eat? Okay. Yeah, but what of you? What of you? What of you is the signal going to? Now, who is the gas gauge for? The car? It's for the driver of the car, right? The car doesn't need a gas gauge. It's the driver that needs a gas gauge. If the car could monitor its own fuel levels and go fuel itself up, there would be no need for a gas gauge. You'd be going along and all of a sudden, whoop, all right, it's going. Oh, you're like, oh, must be running out. And it goes to the gas station and it gasses itself and then it keeps going. You know, it's like riding the horse. The horse is going, you know, and then all of a sudden, whoop, oh, you're like, oh, come on. I want to go somewhere, you know. That's a living organism. You don't need a gas gauge or a grass gauge on a horse, right? You don't need a grass gauge on a horse, but you need a gas gauge on a car because a car can't fulfill its own needs. Guess what your body cannot do? Fulfill its own needs. There's something else that's got to fill the body up, but it uses the body in the process of filling it up. So the symptoms of hunger and thirst and chills and suffocation and so on prove that the body cannot provide for its own needs. So there has to be an operator, right? There must be something that controls the body and supplies its needs, like the driver of the car. What's that? Right? So a physical thing can only take in or absorb what it needs if it's brought close. You can't absorb oxygen if it stays out there. You got to bring it in. It's got to get really close in order for you to absorb it. You can't absorb water through your toenail. I mean, it'll get soft, but you're still going to dehydrate and die. You got to bring it close, and it's got to get in the place in the digestive tract where it can get absorbed, right? So physical things can't go looking for and finding what they need and bring it so that it can be close and be absorbed. So what is it in you and I that feels the symptoms, that recognizes what's needed, and then goes searching for it to bring it close so now the body can get it and absorb it? Ah, yes. So why do we have spiritual needs? Do your liver cells need justice? And your kidney cells need respect? And your heart cells need love? And your neurons need security? And your... No. And where do your thoughts come from? All right. You need freedom, security, knowledge, understanding, loyalty, all of those nice things, but there's not a molecule or combination of molecules that need those things at all. So, all of those are spiritual needs, and spiritual needs reveal the presence of a spiritual entity. So you and I are not just physical. We're not just chemistry. We're not just protons, neutrons, and electrons. It's more than that. There's the body, which is chemical and reacts with the physical world, stores information, sends physical information to the cortex, and so on. But you have a spirit as well. And the spirit is spiritual. And it interacts with the spiritual world, whatever that is. And it receives information, spiritual information, and imparts power to the body. It controls the body's functions and actions and so on and so forth. And the combination of the two is the soul, which is the union of the body and the spirit. It's the soul that's conscious, can think and reason and understand and so on and so forth. You are a soul. And if we think of it from a thinking process, it's your mind. Your mind is a combination of the spirit and the central nervous system. Right? So it's both of those components. Both of those components. Like a computer cannot operate without hardware and software, so you cannot operate without spirit and body. Right? Doesn't work. You got to have them both together. Only then can it function. And you need oxygen, water, food, and warmth. You do not need suffocation, dehydration, starving, freezing, or burning. And you need love and acceptance, respect, honor, truth, justice, mercy, and compassion. You do not need selfishness, rejection, disrespect, dishonor, lies, injustice, cruelty, or indifference. So guess what? Everything you need is good. And when what you need is supplied, it allows you to function properly. Every need you have is a good need. Keep that in mind. Every need that you have is a good need. You have no bad needs. So then the question is, what about addictions? What's going on there? Well, we're getting there. We're just building the foundation. So you only have a need for what is good. You don't have a need for what is bad. And you can only pursue what you need, what is good. You cannot pursue what is contrary to your needs or takes your needs away or what's bad unless you're confused. Unless you're deceived into thinking that you need it when you don't. Or you're forced into a circumstance where you have to give up one in order to keep another. Right? If those circumstances aren't there, you're always going after what you understand is good. Right? So physical needs fulfill life, but your spiritual needs fulfill purpose. Right? And if there's a conflict between the spiritual and the physical, which one's going to win? If you have a conflict between life and purpose, you know why people kill themselves? They lost their purpose. They lost their purpose. Life is simply a means to purpose. Right? Life is simply a means to purpose. So a proof that we are more than matter is that we can renounce the most important physical aspect, which is life. Right? We can renounce that. We can commit suicide. We can be a martyr. We can try to click a clicker. Okay, there we go. We can sacrifice for something, but we can never give up purpose. But if we think we have lost purpose, then we're ready to give up on life. Right? It's the spiritual that's always more important than the physical. right? And everything that gives purpose is spiritual. The difference between a dead person and a living person from a test standpoint is the electricity in the brain. If you don't have any electricity in the brain, you are dead, right? And what is it that gives that electricity? It's the Spirit. That's where it comes from. Now remember, power, everything in nature takes in order to give. And remember, power, when power goes from one medium to another medium, you don't ever lose the power, it just changes its form. So when the power comes through the Spirit, it's in the form of spiritual information. But once that power gets from the Spirit to the cortex of the brain, it generates electricity. It's electrical activity, right? And then you have an electrical chemical processes that happen that then involve all the rest of the body and so on and so forth, and it goes on from there. But if you separate the body and the spirit, then you end up with a dead body and a dead spirit and nothing's working, right? So it's not like you end up with a spirit going off and living and doing its own thing and thinking and all that kind of stuff. No. As humans, you cannot think if you don't have the brain, but you cannot think if you don't have a spirit. You got to have both of them together. And if they're not together, or the brain is messed up, or the spirit's messed up, thinking's going to be messed up or non-existent. All right. So the body is going to signal its needs, and the spirit is going to receive that. It's going to evaluate it, and then it's going to decide what to do. And that decision is going to be put back into the body, either in a yes or a no, and then put the body into action, or keep it from acting in relation to whatever that decision is, right? So the body might be saying, okay, well, we're running low on food. I receive that and I go, oh, I'm hungry. I need food. But right now is not a good time for that because I'm driving and I don't have food with me. And we're going at 70 miles an hour down the highway and it's not good for me to pull off at this moment. Let's look for the next exit where we have your favorite fast food restaurant where you can go, and not right now. What if you have body needs that says, okay, gotta pee right now. And you evaluate that and you go, okay, yeah, bladder's distended, feeling like I need to pee, but we're on the highway 70 miles an hour, sitting in the seat. There's other people in the vehicle, and the next exit is 13 miles down the road. Well, then the decision is what? Yeah, no, hold that in for now. We need to wait until we get to the exit, right? What if the body could make all of its decisions for itself, right? And you're doing something and all of a sudden it says, oh, I'm tired. Or it says, oh, time to pee. Whoa. I hate it when it does that. Right? No, it's not the body that controls everything. It's the spirit that controls it. But there's got to be communication. There's information transfer between the two, right? And when the body sends information up to the spirit, it's a request. But when the spirit sends the information down to the body, it's a command. The body cannot not do what it's told to do unless it simply doesn't have the communication pathway, spinal cord injury or other things like that, or it just doesn't have the capacity because the cells don't have the fuel to be able to actually accomplish the task. Right? So when you have those symptoms, those signals are sent by the body to the spirit, so the spirit can go look for what the body needs, and then now use the body to go after it, grab it, bring it in, eat it, and now the body can absorb it. Right? So the body can't supply its own needs. It's the spirit that can move the body, that searches for the physical things that we need, that makes the body bring those things in, i.e. the breathing and the drinking and the eating and the exposing, or stops it from bringing it in, like holding your breath or fasting or so on. Right? So the body always reacts to outside forces or information. It is governed from outside of itself. It can be forced. You can be handcuffed and thrown in prison and some other things against your will. And it can be harmed from outside. It can be shot and cut and burned and frozen and so on and so forth. But the spirit, it's a little different. It responds to outside informations and so on, but it also acts for itself. It doesn't just react. The spirit can act for itself. It's governed from inside of itself, and it can never be forced, right? And it cannot be something. Can it be forced? Can it be? Yeah, it can't be harmed from outside of itself, right? It can only harm itself from inside, right? And let me go through this. If you didn't have a spirit, you wouldn't be able to see and hear and smell and taste and feel. That is all something that happens because of the combination of the spirit and the brain. It's the mind, right? It's the mind that can do those things, not just the brain. All right. And so without a spirit, there's no consciousness, there are no thoughts, no spiritual needs, no judgment, morality, responsibility, spirituality or ideology, sensory perception, education, teaching or learning, voluntary bodily movements. None of that's possible if you didn't have a spirit. Right? I'm not saying you are a spirit, you're a soul. But it's made up of two components. Right? So do you need love? Yes, okay. So what's the definition of a need? Something that you don't have.
Something that you don't have, but it relates to the purpose or your function.
Okay, relates to the purpose of the function. How does it relate to the function? Can you function without it? Yeah, so you must have it to function. If you don't have it, you can't function. Right? So the definition of need is something that you must have in order to function or survive. But also something that you cannot produce. If you can produce it, it's not a need. Right? So, can you produce love? Nope. Is that just our problem or is that everybody's problem? Everybody's. Huh. So what if you need love and you go to somebody to get love, but they can't produce love? Is that a problem? Welcome to the rest of this week. Do you need a love that is full or incomplete? Do you need a love that is constant or intermittent? Do you need a love that's unselfish or selfish? Do you need a love that's personal or impersonal? All right, so everybody needs a love that's full and constant and unselfish and personal. There's not an exception to that. That's the kind of love that everybody needs, right? Do you need a respect that respects you partially or completely? Do you need a respect that respects you some of the time or all the time? Do you need a respect that respects you so that it can get something from you or so that it can give something to you? Yeah, so it can give to you. And because it has to or because it wants to? Yeah, it wants to. So you need a respect that respects you constantly, completely, so that it can give to you because it wants to, right? So it's voluntary. Do you need an understanding that understands you partially or completely? Yeah, some of the time or all the time. Yeah, for itself or for you. All right, because it has to or because it wants to. Yeah, so you need it constantly, completely, for your sake, because it wants to, right? Voluntarily. That's what we need. So every spiritual need you need completely. Partial doesn't work. Intermittent doesn't work. Forced doesn't work. Ulterior motives doesn't work. You need it completely, constantly, willingly, and selflessly. Every spiritual need you have is that way. Everyone. Everyone. So can something that needs what you need be the source of what you need? All right. Can another human who needs what you need be the source of what you need? All right. Can a tree be the source of what another tree needs? So if you take one tree and you uproot it and you put its roots in a second tree, and you take that second tree and you uproot it and you put its roots in a third tree, and you take that third tree and you uproot it and you put its roots in a fourth tree, and you keep doing that with all of the trees until all of the trees have their roots in all of the other trees, what's going to happen to all the trees? If you can ever get the trees to die. Here we go. Yes, they're all going to die. Why? Because if you need it, you can't be the source of it. And it doesn't matter how many trees you plug all the trees into, they're all going to die. So what happens if you need love and somebody else needs love and somebody else and somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, and you're in a society of a bunch of people that need love and everybody goes to everybody else to get the love that they need? What's going to happen? They're all going to die. Welcome to the end of the world. No, they're all going to die. So, oh man, when your needs are met, oh, it's wonderful. You had enough to drink, enough to eat, enough to breathe, and so on. But when your needs are unmet, it doesn't feel so good. Hunger doesn't feel so good. Thirst doesn't feel so good. Suffocation doesn't feel so good. So, right? So we have a need that's missing, and then there's some suffering associated with it. Sorry, I got to update fonts on that computer back there so that things show up correctly next time. But we'll get it fixed. So there's some suffering associated with it. And then what happens is now I run into some substance or behavior. And that substance or behavior gives me some pleasure or relief for a period of time so that I'm not cognizant of the suffering because I'm not getting what I need. And now, okay, well, that feels good. And that's a positive feedback. And now, but the problem is it fails to satisfy my need. You ever got hungry and ate styrofoam? No? You haven't tried it? It's kind of chewy. You got to chew on it a long time, and still, even then, when you swallow it, it doesn't go down very well. And if you eat enough of it, it'll make you feel pretty full. But in order to get it out of you, you might have to go to the hospital and have surgery. And it won't give you any energy. It won't give you any real satisfaction. It will just make you feel full for a while when you were feeling hungry before. So it gives the pretense of satisfying your need without actually satisfying your need, and then it goes ahead and creates more problems afterwards. Welcome to addiction. Now, I'm not saying people are addicted to styrofoam, but it's just an example. Right? So it fails to satisfy your need, and if you go around eating a lot of styrofoam, you're going to feel guilty. You will, because you know it's not right, and you know it's not helping you, and there's going to be guilt added to that whole cycle. And now you feel really bad, and now your missing need is even worse, and now you have more reason to go back and try whatever that substance or behavior was in order to make you not feel so bad again, but it still doesn't satisfy your need, and it creates more problems along the way. Welcome to the addiction cycle. Right? Welcome to the addiction cycle. So what is it that's missing that's at the beginning of this whole process for every addiction? I don't care what the addiction is. I don't care how young it started or how late it started. I don't care if it's a substance addiction or a behavioral addiction or if it's just a shopping addiction or a spouse addiction or whatever it is. Whatever addiction, there is one thing at the very beginning that's missing in everybody. You know what it is? What's your greatest need? Love. It's love. The lack of love is the beginning and the driving factor of every addiction. Every addiction. Right? It's a lack of love. That's our greatest need. Right? And when that is missing, oh man, all you have to do is have the opportunity to run into something that will take away the emptiness or the void or whatever is there that you don't like, right? For a period of time. And those things can be very specific, like if you're lacking acceptance, then you feel rejection. If you're lacking belonging, then you feel abandonment. If you're lacking a clicker that works, all right, honesty, then you feel betrayed. If you're lacking protection, then you have abuse. If you're lacking appreciation, then you're unappreciated. If you're lacking understanding, then you're misunderstood. If you're out lacking interest, then you're ignored, and so on and so forth. But it can be just that general gnawing void, can't really put your finger on it, that's there. And then, well, then you run across something that takes away that sensation for a little time. Now, everything that you need must be brought in by who? all by yourself, right? So you need oxygen, so you breathe. You need water, so you drink. You need food, so you eat. You need love, so you... You go to somebody who also needs love, who can't be the source of love, in order to get the love that you need, and they can't provide it for you. And then you run empty. Oh, your parents can't do it, your spouse can't do it, your children can't do it, your siblings can't do it, your best friend can't do it. They're not a human being that you can run into that can do it. Because everyone needs love. To be full of love, there must be the constant available source of exactly the kind of love that you need. There must be a belief in that source that brings the love into you and makes it your own. Those are prerequisites, right? And if the source doesn't exist, or if you don't believe, you will remain empty. Right? So if the source doesn't exist, we are all sorry. We don't need to be here. We're just all waiting to die. Right? So that's a cycle, but then we run into substances, we run into behaviors, we run into... nobody has a broccoli addiction, by the way. Nobody. There are certain behaviors, there are certain substances that do not result in a hit of dopamine and having kind of a euphoria associated with it, but there are other things that are. Nobody's addicted to broccoli, but oh man, pizza? Yeah, it's America's addiction. High fat, high salt, high sugar. And if you've got dairy in there, even better, because dairy has casomorphins, right? Like morphine, but cheese-based morphines, right, and all that kind of stuff. It'll hit your dopamine centers, get a good high sugar dose with chocolate, add some caffeine on top of that, and whew, yeah, though you get addicted to that, but broccoli and Brussels sprouts, add a little bit of kale to that, and you're like, oh, yeah, that looks like a green smoothie for somebody else, But you don't have to be addicted to just to those things. You can be addicted to winning. Right? But there's various different ways to win. You can be addicted to shopping or getting new things or other things of that nature. You can be addicted to coffee and smoking and substances and so on and so forth, and there's still that cycle that's there. So who is it that's the source of love and respect and understanding that's complete, constant, voluntary, and unselfish? That's exactly what you need. Who is it? Because it can't be another human being. It's impossible. It can't be multiple other human beings. It's impossible. Right? It has to be something that's full of love, respect, and understanding that constantly, voluntarily, and unselfishly offers those things to you for your sake. That's what it must be. Exactly what you need. Well, when you know that everything in nature takes in order to give, and the next thing from there takes in order to give, and something else takes in order to give, in order for there to be a circuit, there has to be a beginning. Something that doesn't have to take, but only has to give. Right? So, who or what is that? And we'll dive into more of it tomorrow. It's late. I fried your brains already. Mine too. Time for us to rest and digest and, do all of those kind of good things so that we can come back together again tomorrow at 6:30. Same time. Hopefully we'll have our technical details worked out so that we can actually begin on time and then finish on time and so on tomorrow as we continue to go along. I'll tell you this week and this weekend will push your buttons. It will. It's going to challenge what you think. Right? It's going to challenge what you understand. But we have to, because we've got to get to the solutions, the real solutions. And if you look at things the wrong way, if you ask the wrong questions, if you don't go deep enough, you're not going to find the solutions. And all you're going to be left with is once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And to me, that's not freedom. Right? There is freedom. And we're going to find it. And we're going to go there this week. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your blessings. Thank you that you are a good God, wonderful God. Lord, open our eyes and help us to see what we need to see, that we can truly be free. And this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.